A young girl out for justice, a drunk one-eyed marshal, a tale through the Old West. All this can only mean one thing. We're comparing True Grit on this episode of Retro versus Remake.
I'm Reggie Parker.
And I'm Dan Bulick. Welcome to another episode of
Retro versus Remake. Cool.
The podcast where we discuss films and their remakes. Join us as we explore the question, should this remake exist? Today's film is True Grit. The original True Grit was made in 1969, starring John Wayne, Kim Darby, Glenn Campbell, Robert Duvall, Dennis Hopper, and Jeff Corey. Directed by Harry Hathaway. Screenplay by Margaret Roberts. Music by Elmer Bernstein. Just some soundtracks that he did I thought were of note. Ghostbusters, Wild Wild West, and two movies we're probably going to have to do in the future, Magnificent Seven and Cape Fear. Also, Glenn Campbell, one of the actors, sang the theme song to True Grit that we hear in the opening credits. True Grit 2010, starring Jeff Bridges, Haley Steinfeld, Matt Damon, Josh Brolin, and Barry Pepper. Directed by Joel and Ethan Coen. Screenplay by Joel and Ethan Coen. Music by Carter Burwell. And both of these movies are based on Charles Portis's 1968 book of the same name. Okay, Reggie, what's your first experience with either film?
First experience was for this podcast, or if I had seen either one of these films, because there are so many westerns, it might as well be the first time. I know like True Grit came out around the same time as they were doing a couple westerns around that era. Like I know they did like the 310 to Yuma remake and stuff like that. So I watched some of it, but I really didn't have a frame of reference for either of these films.
I never watched the original before, but I did watch the remake. I bought a bootleg version of the remake when I was at a bar after a few drinks. This guy comes in, he's like, I got some bootlegs. I'm like, oh, let me see. So I got a nice bootleg $5 version of True Grit, and I think I only watched it once, and I didn't really remember much about it. So it was fun to rewatch it for this podcast. There you nice. Go. All right, now these movies are very similar, but before we get into a comparison, let's do a brief synopsis. Young Maddie Ross's father was murdered by Tom Chaney. When the authorities fail to do anything about it, Maddie takes justice into her own hands. She decides to hire Marshal Rooster Cogburn, a man of true grit. While she tries to convince him, she acquires money, a horse, and meets Texas Ranger LaBeef. LaBeef also wants Chaney for his own reasons. He offers to team up, but Maddie refuses. Rooster Cogburn eventually agrees, but refuses to take Maddie with him. Instead, he teams up with LaBeef and tries to leave her behind. Maddie, not one to quit so easily, follows the two men and eventually joins them. They end up looking for Lucky Ned Pepper, as Tom Chaney is most likely with him. Maddie and company eventually come to a house occupied by two associates of Pepper. They are told Pepper will be at the house shortly. They decide to wait for Pepper to ambush him. Pepper arrives and a shootout ensues. Some men die, but Pepper gets away. The pursuit continues. One day, by dumb luck, Maddie stumbles upon Tom Chaney. She is able to shoot him, but she gets kidnapped once Pepper arrives. Pepper tells Rooster Cogburn to leave or the girl dies. Maddie is taken to a hideout and is kept under the watch of Tom Chaney. Pepper and his crew go to meet with Cogburn. While they are gone, LaBeef comes and rescues Maddie. Cogburn eventually has a shootout with Pepper and his crew. Pepper is about to kill Cogburn when LaBeef saves him too. Chaney eventually comes to and knocks out LaBeef. Maddie shoots Chaney but then falls into a pit of rattlesnakes. Cogburn arrives, but not before Maddie gets bit. Cogburn then races to get Maddie medical attention. It takes its toll on her, but Maddie's life is saved. Then each movie has their own ending. Okay, which we will discuss.
That we will.
All right. So not too many differences, like I said before. So where did you want to start this comparison, Reggie?
Well, one of the most obvious and immediate differences that we see is in the intro of both films. So in the original film, you actually see the circumstances of Frank Ross's death actually played out. He's talking to his family, he's telling them about his plan to go get horses and all this stuff. You get an introduction to Maddie there, though a brief one, and then we move on to on his journeys, Frank Ross and Cheney in a bar. Um, Cheney feels like he's being cheated at cards, and when he pulls him drunkenly out of the bar, he turns around and shoots Frank Ross. So we actually see him get killed in the original film, whereas in the remake, it's a voiceover. Yeah.
Yeah, what the voiceover didn't leave you all warm and fuzzy inside?
Personally, not just because you're telling me about her father, which I understand someone being upset because their father died, without having like a frame of reference or met him, or even the guy that killed him, because really both parties are being described there. I don't really have much to work on other than here's the protagonist, this young girl, here's what happened to her. But I think taking a little bit of time to actually show the scene went a lot further for me when it came to the original film.
Yeah, I have to agree. I was a little surprised to see that the remake would started with a voiceover. I guess I had hoped that the remake would go a little bit deeper into the backstories of Maddie and her father, maybe expand on that relationship just a little bit more. I do like the original, how they you do obviously get an introduction to her father, very brief. You don't really get much from him, but you get a little bit from Maddie. You see that she's sort of in charge of the finances of the whole family, so you see right away that she's kind of this strong young protagonist that, yeah, I guess I don't think would be pretty typical back in the old West, you know. So I like that introduction, and I was really, I guess, sort of let down that they didn't want to go there with the remake. They just wanted to start right away with, or they wanted to start right away after her father got shot. So yeah,
Yeah, it's an opportunity, though a brief one, like you mentioned, to show some of what Maddie's capable of, and we'll get into that character a little bit more as we break the movie down. But like you mentioned earlier on, she's doing like the accounting for the house. She's giving advice, which you imagine there's not a lot of situations where like the daughter is giving the father advice in that Western setting. And it's obvious very early on that she's very capable. And then also seeing how pointless her father's death was, how this guy he had taken in just turns around and shoots him for almost no reason, other than he was drunk and frustrated. It then gives you insight into that character and shows you a lot more why Maddie thinks that he's a coward and why Maddie wants to see justice occur. Because this guy, who more or less they were taken care of, stabs him in the back, and you actually see that happen. Which I think it's a movie. I'm always going to want to see what happened over you telling me what happened in general.
I definitely agree there. I think the one thing I like about not seeing any of the stuff in the original with Frank is that Tom Chaney's kind of this mysterious character, and you kind of develop your own sense of what he's going to be and what he looks like. And then, obviously Maddie has him built up in her head as this huge source of evil because he killed her father. And then when you see him, they kind of play with your expectations. Instead of being this big badass or anything near that, he's just kind of dumb and pathetic. So I like that you don't see him early so that your expectations are completely wrong of what he would be like. But I think I would like to see the relationship between Maddie and her father a little bit more than I would like that reveal of Tom Chaney.
The payoff of kind of playing with expectations there's not enough buildup in my mind to make it really worth kind of excluding that, because I think you're right, because even the first film doesn't really explore her relationship with her father thoroughly, but there's enough there in those short interactions that, all right, I get it, I get why you're upset. I think that would have been a good idea to play into maybe this good guy of Frank Ross, even though he's not going to be with us long in the movie. Some of that would actually do well in terms of character development and letting the audience feel invested in the story.
Yeah, then maybe, I don't know. I know he's only on screen briefly because it would be the intro, but maybe he does something or says something to Maddie that she could maybe use later through her journey. So it's like, oh yeah, he's still helping her beyond the grave. I don't know. But yeah, I did miss that we didn't have the Maddie and her father Frank, that we didn't have that interaction in the remake.
In the remake, there's sort of like a scripture or like some sort of saying that comes up on the screen during that voiceover or something like almost like delivers from evil. I don't remember the exact quote, but
Yeah.
the father had like left some sort of remark like that, as you mentioned, and then she uses it again later in the film. It's a trope. It's been done, but I think there's a reason why it's been done because it gives you a little bit of character motivation and sort of payoff if she gets her revenge.
Yeah.
That's whatever. Intros are intros, and I also get that perhaps it maybe the way the original intro doesn't necessarily play that well to a modern audience because people would have the head scratcher of saying, "Well, why did we introduce this guy and then he's just like not here?" Because
Yeah, I could see that too. Yeah.
I would have that complaint in some sense. I
Well,
guess.
then you might just have to make the movie longer, Reggie, which I could see why they would not want to do that because the original film is longer than the remake. So that's one thing I was happy about in the remake. Oh, a little shorter. Thank you, thank you, remake.
We're gonna get into it, but I think some of the cuts are perfectly fine. Like
Hmm.
there's some scenes that they build out more, but they don't necessarily drive the action. So the shorter runtime, which we often do see with remakes, just the modern audiences don't have the same capacity for these long, kind of drawn out films. From a commercial standpoint, it doesn't make sense to do super long films. But yeah, I enjoyed in this case the runtime being a little bit shorter.
Yeah, especially for a western, a genre that hasn't been, blowing up the box office. I mean, this movie did, the remake. It made a lot of money. But at that point, there weren't that many westerns out, and people weren't really flocking to the theaters to see it. So I absolutely understand and agree with the decision to make some cuts to make the film shorter.
Well, absolutely. But speaking of westerns, although Maddie is our protagonist per se, we do have our classic western gunslinger in the original film, John Wayne playing Rooster Cogburn, and in the remake, Josh. Damn it, not Josh. Brolin. That'd been cool. And, what the hell?
That would have been an interesting movie.
And in the remake, Jeff Bridges playing your Rooster character. This is a good time to talk about some of the differences between the two portrayals.
Yes. So John Wayne, who's played more cowboys than I can count,
Yeah.
and I guess Jeff Bridges is sort of a character actor. He's kind of become the dude. He's just become the dude in his later career.
Yeah, this is like the Western dude.
Yeah, pretty much. I guess nothing. I don't want to knock him too bad, but John Wayne did a fine job as Cogburn. I think I'm gonna say this a lot through the comparison. The name of the movie is True Grit, and I just
Right.
think that the remake was a little more gritty with their portrayal. I love the way you meet Cogburn in the remake. You don't even see him; he's just in a porta-john, and he's like, "She's occupied," and I was just cracking up right away from Jeff Bridges' portrayal, even though I didn't see him at all. So I think he's good in the original John Wayne. I don't think he does anything incredibly memorable as far as
Yeah.
I was when I was watching the portrayal. I thought it was fine, but I don't think he was like as gritty. I don't think he was as like edgy or dangerous as like the portrayal by Jeff Bridges. Jeff Bridges also was a little funnier. I think that's another thing I'm going to just be saying about the remake. Just there's not a lot of opportunities for humor in the remake that either they were there in the original and they just don't work today, or they just were completely not there. So I like both portrayals, but I'm going to lean a little more towards Jeff Bridges' portrayal.
Yeah, no, I agree. As I was watching this, because I was telling a friend that we were watching True Grit, and he made mention that this was the movie that got John Wayne his one and only Oscar.
Yes.
And I was watching it, and I was just saying, why? You know?
Yeah, I looked that up too, and they had said maybe it was because he had been nominated before and he never won. It was maybe sort of almost like here you go, you did good before, so this is to make up for all the other performances you did.
And like you said, he's played a cowboy a lot of times. I mean, obviously, John Wayne is the cowboy in movies. Pilgrim. I did feel that this character did have a little bit more
Depth?
depth. Yeah, depth is definitely a word. And he wasn't just like this blanket, I'm the tough guy, I'm going to ride in on my horse. There's some humility to him. There's the drunken aspect of him. there are moments where, kind of the running joke in both films is like he's an older, fatter kind of cowboy. More so to me with John Wayne than Jeff Bridges when you're watching it. But, Wayne, it's kind of more the same from him. I found that a lot of the parts that I liked about the film were kind of turning it on its head and having the little girl be part of the action. I found that to be a little bit more interesting
Hmm.
in terms of the portrayal. And Jeff Bridges, as you mentioned, this is way more, like you said, this is way more lines and opportunities. Like he he comes across with more personality, just his acting style. He says funny things, he does funny things, and that Rooster seems a little less pathetic in my mind. Whereas like the John Wayne one, he's not doing much. And I think they really lean in to him kind of being like not that good. Like the court scene where they show that he killed 23 guys.
Hmm.
For whatever reason, it hit me more with John Wayne, where I felt like, yeah, he's just kind of like bumbling his way through the West and like killing people. That movie made it feel like there was more of a changing of the guard coming for me, like the whole talk of lawyers and stuff like that. John Wayne doesn't like lawyers, and that just felt more apparent in that film. Whereas like the Jeff Bridges movie made me feel like we were in a western, we weren't necessarily seeing the West changing.
I
I
see.
don't know if you caught that vibe.
I didn't pick up on it too much. I know what you mean. They definitely mention lawyers a lot more in the original. She mentions her lawyer Daggett. So going back to that court scene, I know like the acting, I guess the method of acting just improved since the '60s. So I definitely gave the original a pass for a lot of the
Sure.
acting, but I was definitely more engrossed in the story when Jeff Bridges was telling it. His slow, sort of nonchalant, kind of just a matter of fact kind of attitude about it. While John Wayne, I don't know how to describe it. It was almost like it felt a little more forced almost
Right.
because like everybody was like laughing like immediately at the same time. So it definitely felt more scripted. Obviously they're both scripted, but it seemed to be easier for Jeff Bridges to sort of
Yeah.
deliver those lines than did for John Wayne.
Jeff Bridges, like you said, the method of acting is different. And when he's telling the story, you felt like he was there. You felt like, okay, he was there and it went a little crazy and stuff like that. Whereas like John Wayne just has that matter of fact delivery and called that guy and I shoots him and he came at me. And like, it's cool. Like, it's John Wayne and like there's something to the way he played his characters in his films. And like, it's is memorable. I use the word a lot when we're talking about these movies. It's iconic. This was a classic John Wayne with a little bit of a twist because of the nature of the story.
Right.
He's playing older. He's got this young girl who's kind of like just kind of a boss. Like she runs around doing a lot of very exceptional stuff, and it kind of lets this old time gunslinger. It kind of puts him in the back seat in a lot of
Yeah.
scenes. I think that could also have played in to John Wayne's Oscar turn on this because he's doing something a little bit different than what they're used to him doing. He's still, it's a Western. He's on the horse. He's got the reins in his mouth and he's shooting guns. But there's a humanness to it.
Yeah.
There's a little more of a, I don't know. He has to play off of someone else more in this film than he probably had to in a lot of other films.
Yeah, he's not the driving force for justice in this movie. In either movie, Rooster Cogburn, he's definitely taking a backseat. Maddie is the one that,
Hmm.
and he's taking orders from a little girl, pretty much. I mean, she paid him, right?
Right.
And yeah, I guess I could see that for John Wayne because I would assume most of his cowboy roles were just like the good guy who always, he might seem dirty, but he's genuinely a good guy. He's going to do the right thing at the end of the day. But I guess the way Rooster Cogburn's set up, you're not exactly sure.
Right.
And he wants that money, and you trust that he's most likely going to do the right thing. But he does mention too to Maddie at one point that he did rob a bank, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that comes out in both films.
Yeah. So he's not 100% good. He'll take care of himself if he has to. He won't try to hurt sort of an innocent bystander, but
Right.
he will break the law if he needs to.
Right, and you see some of that play out, like you mentioned in the court scene, where he is a lawman, but there's a question about his tactics.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is he defending himself? Is like, how is it that in a 4-year stretch you've killed 23 people while doing your job? you have that aspect of it.
I got more of a sense in the remake that he was a little more trigger happy to shoot these people. I think they bring it up more. I think they bring it up more just in general. Like, you just keep shooting him. He's like, yeah, I was just defending myself. You know, it's what happened. I feel like the Jeff Bridges one's more to kill instead of just bring them in for questioning.
Sure. And the remake does, like you mentioned, that grit aspect of it. The remake does more effects. There's scenes that are noticeably more violent in this
Mm-hmm.
remake than their original portrayal. Like, for instance, there's one scene where a guy gets shot off his horse, and for not real reason other than for effect, he like lands on a rock. So like the dude falls off a horse, head gets smashed by a rock, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Or when there's a scene where, of course, the guy gets his fingers cut off, and like that's just way more graphic in this remake. So the trigger happiness comes across more. I think you're right.
Yeah, well, going back to that scene, in the original, his fingers don't get cut off. His fingers just get cut. And he even makes a
Right.
comment like, oh, I still got my fingers on. But in the remake, you see all those fingers come off, and that
Yeah,
guy's just screaming like, oh my god, my fingers. So it is
yeah,
definitely more gritty of the true grit
yeah.
films, the remake.
And I think kind of going back to the point that you were making about him robbing the bank, you see that although he is a marshal, he is a lawman, that he sort of plays by his own rules. He has a moral compass. He has different rules, like even some of the gangsters have rules where it's like no women and children, things of that nature. But for him, robbing the bank was like robbing a thief because it was a high interest bank. And Maddie, you know, rightfully so, points out that like it's just like stealing somebody's wallet. Like you can't treat it as a different thing. So you see a little bit of a play back and forth with them there, and it also explores some of Rooster's morality, you know, dynamics, yeah, different schemes and tactics. These little scenes make a big difference in fleshing out a character that otherwise is kind of like your straight shooting, you know, Western guy in a white hat.
Yeah, and another thing the remake does is I think you get a little more time with Maddie and Cogburn. He goes more into his backstory. He goes on and on. I can't really give specific details, but he's a talker in that remake, so he has
Yeah,
more to play with. I feel Jeff Bridges, and like I said before, Jeff Bridges just feels really comfortable as this Cogburn guy. So I was able to definitely roll with his exaggerated stories as long as they were.
yeah, and you know, I think part of it is to kind of step away from some of the like racial or racist tropes in the film, but like getting away from him, like in the original playing cards, he's got like he's at the drugstore with the Chinese guy, and he's got the cat, and like all that stuff was like, all right, that's interesting, but completely unnecessary. And I think Bridges, just like you mentioned, he gets to do more of his backstory through his personality and his talking, which ultimately I think works because when you're looking at a character like this, I think part of his mystique in history, part of it is true, and then part of it is kind of the way he remembers it. Just like shoot the guy in the court scene, like he has a sort of romanticized idea about what he's been doing, and it's interesting to see him kind of portraying his old stories.
True. So did you have a preference when it comes to Cogburn?
Oh, absolutely, Jeff Bridges. Absolutely, absolutely. I like more, not even just in the context of the movie, but more just in the context of westerns at that time. Overall, I liked what was happening with the John Wayne character and how he did have to sort of take this backseat to this kind of like badass chick, but it didn't do much for me because the whole time I was watching it, I'm just sitting there kind of looking at these generic cowboy characters. I'm like, the most interesting thing happening is not them. Like
Yeah,
they're just, in my opinion, they're just kind of there.
I agree. Yeah. It wasn't necessarily the way they were delivering lines or anything. It was just the lines they were delivering and the way the story was set up made it an interesting enough story to follow. But nothing he did necessarily stood out, especially from today's standards.
Yeah.
So what Jeff Bridges was doing was much more enjoyable to watch afterwards.
Yeah, and there was I'm
I
trying to
also I also like the way he says "le beef." I just like saying. I've been saying that all week. Just wanted to throw
yes,
that out there.
I'm glad that you threw that out there. I I also I'm trying to really pin down this moment in the film, but there's like a scene I think like some of his gunslinging, you know, early on because there's a bit of a different dynamic of when LaBeef is around and when he's not around. There were kind of like more scenes where Cogburn's doing some of the saving in the movie, where like before it's kind of like split between the two characters. And I had a feeling that Jeff Bridges Cogburn, in my opinion, seemed to be like that Maddie had more respect for him, like in a sense of I think there were moments where she saw, okay, damn, this guy is kind of a badass. That played out in that movie a little bit more than you saw the John Wayne character, where she kind of has like a begrudging respect for him until the end, but like she's not really. I don't think she was very impressed with him through most of the movie. Like she knew about his history and that he had grit, but I felt like there were scenes where Jeff Bridges just came across as impressive that you don't quite see from John Wayne. I don't know if you caught that vibe, but it's just like a dynamic that I sort of internalized when I was watching it.
I don't know if I picked up on that too much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like John Wayne. John Wayne's cool, but I don't know. Jeff Bridges just seemed more capable as his rooster than John Wayne, and in in a more consistent way, is kind of what I took away from it.
I could see that. Like at the end of the day, this guy's definitely going to get it done.
Mm.
The Jeff Bridges one, but the John Wayne one, maybe he'll get it done. Yeah, I could see not as much confidence placed in him, I suppose.
But there was more time spent kind of one on one with Jeff Bridges and Maddie, and there was less of that time split with LaBeef and Cogburn taking turns, sort of being the tough guy. Jeff Bridges gets to play in that space a little bit more because of how the screen time gets split in the two films.
It's true. Should we get into Maddie?
I think we should get into Maddie.
Mm-hmm. So we have Maddie in the original. She's portrayed by Kim Darby. In the remake, she's portrayed by Haley Steinfeld. So I'm going to start at the most obvious place, just the ages.
Yeah.
Maddie's supposed to be pretty young, early teens. In the remake, she's portrayed by a 14-year-old girl, and in the original, she's portrayed by a 22-year-old woman. So there's definite age gap there in the portrayals. Did you notice that at all when you were watching?
Oh yeah, I absolutely noticed it. When I was watching the original film, because I don't think in that and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that they ever actually mentioned her age. They mentioned that she's younger, but I didn't hear like a number.
No, I don't think they ever mentioned her age. And I think that was a smart decision, too, because if they had said 14, they would have been like, I don't think that girl's 14. While I didn't think she was 22, I definitely thought she was at least like in her late teens in
Yeah.
the movie. Yeah.
As I was watching it, my kind of takeaway from it was I had her pegged around like a 16, like maybe 17, but I had her like right in that 16-year-old age group. She seemed to fit that mold, and it sort of informed the way that I was watching the film. Just she was very capable, but there were some moments with some of the older characters, like LaBeef, for instance, that could have played more in the field of romance, that just would not have been acceptable in the remake.
Not at all.
Not even a little bit. So
yeah, it was weird that there's the line in the original where LaBeef goes to her, I was going to kiss you, but I think I'll spank you. I was surprised to see that the remake still used that line. I was like, really? That's interesting choice there.
Was an interesting choice. Definitely should have cut that. Should have cut it. Because when you're explicitly saying someone's 14, I know that they're also playing with a time period and setting. It doesn't really matter in this case because I didn't feel that the movie was clinging to any sort of realism. Like it always came across to me as a fictional kind of account. So even if people were trying to hook up with 14-year-olds, let's leave that in the history books.
Yeah, I could see them maybe doing that because maybe they're trying to stick to the source material. But you are making a movie, and you do have liberties to make changes. Maybe that's one thing you could have changed, especially for a 2010 audience. Just a grown man saying he would potentially kiss a 14-year-old girl. Just, ooh, that doesn't fly.
Yeah, a little rough. I don't know. Even watching it back, and this could be the script, but they both come across to me as very capable. They're making deals and negotiating with men and like conducting business and
not only negotiating but like winning all her negotiations. Yeah,
every man she comes across she best when it comes to verbally. So she may not be a physically imposing protagonist, but she definitely earns people's respect with her verbal ability and her persistence. Um, the other side of it too, though, is that in both films she also gains the respect of these cowboys as it were by showing her own grit on in the journey. In both films, they mention that she earned her spurs. So by then she has everyone's respect. I think that I personally am leaning more towards the Kim Darby portrayal, and really just because I pegged her as a little bit older, and I thought that it kind of helped serve as the story for myself while watching it. Like it was impressive to have a 14-year-old doing all this stuff, but I don't know. I just felt like they could do more with the character by having her ambiguous in age.
I think I kind of said this before, but you get more with the original Maddie in the original film. Like we said, you get more time with her and her father.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's one particular scene that I kind of liked in the original. It's right after Maddie gets her father's possessions. Like she starts just crying. Like she's been tough the entire time, negotiating with people, just going about her business, just doing everything as a matter of fact. But then like when she's alone with her father's possessions, she kind of has like a moment to herself. And I thought that was, that makes sense for a young girl. Your father was just murdered, and then you're going to be tough in front of everybody else, but maybe when you're alone, you'll let a little bit of that vulnerability out. So I liked that they had that in the original, and we don't really get a moment like that in the remake at all, where she's at all upset that her father's dead. I mean, she is because she's out for revenge the entire film, but you never get any like sort of, I guess, tender moment with
Right.
the Maddie in the remake, where you're just like, where you just are reminded that, oh yeah, this is a young girl at the end of
Right.
the day. She's tough as hell, but she's still a young girl, and she's gonna sort of deal with things maybe that a young girl would deal with it. And I liked that the original did that, and I was again just a little upset that they didn't have anything like that in the remake.
Yeah. She stays very matter of fact in the remake. I mean, you see it in both films, but I think part of this is the runtime. I think part of this is also what audiences kind of expected from films at the time. One, seeing the father die, which we talked about, but then the public hanging. It's more of an event in that original film, and it gives her an opportunity to kind of like voice her displeasure with the entire act of a public hanging. And she also talks about some of her feelings about the judge that sentenced these men to death. So you actually start hearing some of her different opinions and takes on things very early in the film that you don't get in the remake.
Yeah.
That she's tough and she's smart, but like she's kind of a one note character in the remake, which is just like, I want revenge for my father.
Mm-hmm.
The original, I just felt like she had a little bit more personal agency and ambitions outside of just the revenge.
Yeah, she definitely had a little more in the original. Again, like you said, maybe the runtime plays into that. But, for the screen time she had, I thought Haley did amazing as like a tough, being able to portray someone who's that young and still tough, being able to handle her own around these grown men who are supposed to, I gotta help the little lady, but she's kind of flipping the game. And she's definitely believable in her portrayal that she can order these men to do what she wants. So I think she was strong there, but I think that the original Maddie just had a little more to play with in terms of like just getting more dialogue and whatnot.
I was very impressed with Haley's acting. I thought that she did amazing in those scenes where she has to play off of other actors who are kind of going back and forth with her. The scene with the ponies being a good example, where she's negotiating that deal. You see that in both films, and both actresses do a good job of it. But it's obviously more impressive when you actually have a young woman doing it, as opposed to a 22-year-old person pretending to be an age, whatever. Definitely cool. There's more that I want to get into about the characters, but that comes towards the end, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to step on that just yet, but when it comes to just the general vibe, they're pretty even to me. But I think the original actors had more to work with.
I'll agree that the original actress had more to work with, But I'm gonna give the slight edge to Haley just because she is a 14-year-old girl, and I think overall what she had to do, I think her lines are a little more solid. For me, I thought she was definitely just a little better than Darby, so I'll give a slight edge to Haley on that one.
I can see that. Sticking to my guns, Dan. I like.
Do what you would. No, I liked. I wish she had more to do, like in the original. I really
Yeah.
do.
And honestly, I'm probably docking some points for the voiceover work early. I think
Hmm.
if she got the opportunity to play out some of those scenes, to play out some of that drama, I would definitely be right there with you.
Yeah, maybe if you were able to see the innocent girl before the revenge-driven girl, and then you could see that turn, maybe that would help you. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right, and then maybe that leaves us with our third main character. I'm gonna say it the way Jeff Bridges said it, LaBeef.
Well, beef.
So we got LaBeef, played by musician Glenn Campbell in the original, and Matt Damon in the remake. So maybe with LaBeef, we should start with the fact that his story doesn't, in the remake, doesn't follow exactly the original. He sort of deviates. In the original, pretty much when LaBeef is introduced to the group, he's there the entire time and he stays with them until the end. But in the remake, LaBeef and Cogburn just keep butting heads the way they do, and LaBeef leaves not once but twice. Did you have any issue with the remake making LaBeef leave all those times?
I actually did. Just given the fact that I just watched the original film, I think in a weird way, going back to our conversation about the Haley Stanfield portrayal, I think it helped her because there's more one-on-one time with Jeff Bridges. But I think it hurts the plot in some ways. I'm gonna say in a lot of ways for me, it hurt the plot. But then there were some moments that it actually made more sense in the context of how things went down. The biggest point being when they actually catch up to Peppers, LaBeef's not there. So when he shows up, it's actually a surprise. And I think that that was a nice play, but I just also thought it was so arbitrary when he left all those times. And for that one reveal, I don't think that it was worth separating those characters because we didn't really get to see his bravery, his grit, as much as we did in the original.
I think it was okay for him maybe to leave once. I don't think he should have left twice. I think for me, the one that made sense was him leaving towards the end when Maddie's at her lowest point, and then she's in the camp with Tom Chaney, and then you have Cogburn just out there against Pepper and his gang, and then you're just like, what's gonna happen? How's Cogburn gonna save her if he's all the way
Right.
down there? And then to have LaBeef come back at the last minute, he's like, oh, he's back. So that made sense there, but the thing is, it's sort of weakened because you already had him leave and come back.
Yeah.
So by doing it twice, I think you're hurting that the impact it could have for him coming back at the end of the movie. So I think they should have just had him
Agree.
come back or leave and come back once.
Both films play on that idea of after they get the intel from the two gangsters that were killing one another more or less. After they get that intel, in the original, Labib does mess up. Like he shoots a shot, hits the horse instead of Peppers, and that's kind of like his screw up there. In this remake, like he already hasn't had that much screen time. We get it, he's a Texas Ranger, but we really haven't seen him truly in action. And he gets in a kind of a squabble with an old man about a little girl. They break up their little agreement on how to split the money. He just leaves, and then when he comes back, it's not like he comes back to the characters. He comes back to get caught.
Hmm.
It's a weak kind of moment for the character. I don't think that the payoff that you get from it was worth, like you mentioned, having that happen twice.
Yeah. Overall, though, I think, again, I said this before, but I think the character in the remake has more funnier moments than in the original. That's for sure. Matt Damon's portrayal of LaBeef is definitely for comic relief at a lot of moments. Even after that moment we talked about where he got ambushed, he gets dragged around, bites his tongue, and then
Right.
going back into the grittiness and the humor, Jeff Bridges tries to rip the tongue off, just like I'll just rip the rest of it off. He's like, no, 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 it'll let it heal. So I do feel a little bit. I guess I feel more bad for Matt Damon's LaBeef, just because he had so much shit just happen to him, so much more than the original LaBeef. That's for
Yeah.
sure. And I don't want to jump ahead here. Yeah, just
No,
he got his ass kicked a lot more, and he had a lot more humorous moments in the remake. That's for sure.
yeah. Felt that LaBeef, yeah, as played by Damon, you're right that there is that type of humor. There's kind of more of like give and take verbally that you see some of the comedic effect. The original LaBeef, one, they do kind of play into a romantic aspect because he's like clearly kind of flirting with her at the Monarch, the boarding house, and then throughout he's just kind of a goof, you know, like that's the way I sort of saw him. Like he's doing heroic things and he's helping with some of the action, but he just kind of came across to me as like a bit full of himself and goofy. I don't know. He felt a little more capable to me. He just happened to get upset often or have comedic moments. But like overall, he felt like the more capable gunman when it was all said and done.
Yeah, and I think it. While I didn't like that he left and got ambushed, I think the ambush, just made him look really pathetic in the remake, and then it makes his when he's able to save Cogburn at the end with that sniper shot. It just makes that moment have so much more weight because the whole time he's almost like this goof. They have a shootout earlier, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Then you don't know if he's hitting any of the targets during that shootout. And then like there's this final moment where Cogburn's about to die, and then Matt Damon just finally nails him from like hundreds of yards away. And
Yeah,
it's all the more impressive because you're sort of making this character pathetic in the remake, and then you're having a beautiful redemption for him at that moment. Whereas in the original, he has that itchy trigger finger moment during the shootout, but I didn't really feel that he had as much of an arc in the original that he did in the remake. I just feel like he wanted to get that bounty, bring it to Texas, and then he dies.
yeah, yeah. So that is like you mentioned, that is a major difference that we actually have a death here of the character as opposed to he's okay.
He's alive, maybe. They're not sure.
Like
I'd like that decision to because, like I said, Matt Damon's LaBeef just kept getting shit on the entire
right,
movie, and to like add insult to injury, you're gonna kill him too at the end from a rock. Oh no,
yeah,
he lived. Okay, so I thought you give him that redemption moment where he's able to save Cogburn, and then you let him live. You don't just kill him right away.
yeah, I agree. And though I don't agree with like you mentioned leaving twice.
Yeah, that was a
He,
dumb decision. I don't know why they needed to do that twice. I think you could have come up with a clever way of like them separating as a group. Like we're gonna go ambush him out there. Well, I'm gonna investigate the cabin more. You could have done it
right.
like that, and then bam, you could have still had Matt Damon being tied up and dragged around. It's just
Sure.
having him leave twice. It when it happened the second time, it just didn't mean as much because he's gonna come back. I know he came back once, he'll come back again. He's a boomerang. This guy.
Yeah. And having her kind of almost at that point sort of regret her decision to have picked Rooster, and she alludes to, I picked the wrong man. I should have gone with a character more like LaBeef to be the marshal, the one that tries to get this bounty for her. Like, okay, that's a nice moment, but the fact that he's like immediately leaves after that, as you mentioned, cheapens it. It makes more sense, as I mentioned, like when he comes back the second time, in terms of the plot of the film, I thought that portion made sense that we don't know where he is, and then he comes back to help save them, as opposed to we're both here. Hey, we rode over the ridge, let the girl go, bye, and just out of nowhere we're back. Like it's just rough,
Yeah,
rough.
yeah. I wasn't sure, like, I guess they didn't know LaBeef was with Cogburn at that point. I was a little unclear how they were
They were both
unsure.
riding together.
Yeah, and they could see them both, right?
Yeah, they knew exactly where both of them were because when they're up on that ridge, you see both of them on their horses. Uh, John Wayne fires off his gun, showing that we're leaving, we're far enough,
Yeah.
and without any real explanation or reason, they overtake the bad guys and free her. I liked in the remake that you don't know where LaBeef is, and
Hmm.
then he helps save him. That just makes more sense from a
Yeah.
plot point,
Hmm.
uh, even though they probably shouldn't have had him kind of go off on the first hissy fit because that didn't serve that
Exactly.
well at all.
Yeah. And then I know we keep ripping on this, and then because the reason he left the first time is because they keep going back and forth and jabbing each other, and so
Yeah.
LaBeef can't handle it emotionally, so he leaves, and then he leaves again the second time for the same reason. It's
Yeah.
like you should have just had it sort of accumulate, so like it would make more sense. Like, all right, I've had enough from you. Like this
Hmm.
is it. That's all I could take. So I'm out of here. Yeah, I definitely don't agree with that decision. Have him leave that first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyways, back to the portrayals of LaBeef. Was there anything else you wanted to add there about like?
As I mentioned, I because Maddie's age is so ambiguous, I did kind of like the idea that she did kind of care about quote unquote boys, or like she had kind of this little crush on LaBeef, and that sort of plays itself out a little bit more as he's there dying and stuff like that. Like that emotional connection kind of fleshed out the Maddie character more for me. But it didn't have to be LaBeef. It could have been literally anybody. So it did. I liked what the character and the ambiguity with her age brought to a different character, to be honest, not the LaBeef character itself. But I don't know, Matt Damon just he gets it. Like he had the portrayal down. There was a weird choice in terms of screenplays to him leaving, but overall, I just think it's a more fleshed out character to me. It just feels like a real person as opposed to just like this. I mean, this dude's just like he's got his chin and he's got his stories about Texas. Like that's all. Glenn Campbell.
He's a well-renowned gunslinger, but like he comes across pretty pathetic early in the movie. But he's able to redeem himself, like I said, and he does have more fun moments. He's got that
Yeah.
one moment. He's got that one quote that made the trailer. The sun was in your eyes, or should I say, your eye? I remember that from the trailers back in the day.
Yeah.
So he definitely had more fun. Again, the original, I just don't really remember much about what LaBeef did, other than like you said, that weird kind of tension. But it's okay because we don't really know Maddie's age.
Right.
Other than that, and I can't really remember him doing much other than dying at the end from a rock. I agree with you. I feel like Matt Damon definitely more fleshed out, had more to do, was more fun overall.
Yeah. There's little aspects, and this is getting into splitting hairs. There's little aspects that I like that he's around. There's aspects that I don't like that he's around. Like in the original, when they overtake those two bandits in the house, LaBeef is the one on the roof,
Hmm.
clogging up the chimney. Like makes sense to me that like this lawman would be like taking direction from Rooster and doing different activities. It makes the journey feel a little more realistic that there's two capable gunmen and the girl,
Hmm.
as opposed to just like an old guy and a little girl who really hasn't gotten to the point where she's you know getting involved in gunfighting at all.
Right.
So that element I like, but I'll also take on the back end that it makes more sense for him to just show up as almost like the cavalry. So there's a give and take that plays in both films, but overall, I'm leaning towards the remake in terms of the character itself. Some of the choices, as we mentioned, not the best, but the character's great.
Yeah. Highly enjoyable. The beef. Where do you want to go from here? Should we go into the ending?
I think we should.
Okay. So our endings in both films are completely different. In the original, after Maddie gets bit by the snake, after she's taken to the hospital, I should say, we sort of get a PS scene with Maddie back on her family farm, and Rooster's with her. They have a nice little conversation about their future, and she wants to bury him. She wants to have him buried in her family plot, and then they sort of become friends at the end, right?
Yeah,
It's no longer just you're a gun for hire. It's now you're sort of part of my family. I want you here. We're gonna hang out, and they are gonna hang out, and that's what we're led to believe in the original. In the remake, in after Maddie's brought to medical care, yeah, that's the last time Maddie ever sees Rooster. And we jump cut 25 years to the future, something that does not happen at all in the original. And I should say, in the original, Maddie's arm was in a sling after getting bit by a rattlesnake, but in the remake, she had to get that arm amputated because the poison just took too much toll. So we have a one-armed Maddie in her late 30s trying to see Rooster again because he had mentioned that he was in a gun show to her in a letter she got. And then she goes to see him and he dies before she gets there, which is like,
Yeah.
ah, oh, damn, that really sucked. And then she's just kind of, okay, that sucks, but I'm going to move his body. And kind of the promise that was made in the original gets fulfilled here. His body gets moved to her family plot, even though she has like no
Yeah.
family. She never got married or anything.
Yeah.
And
Like,
she maybe will see LaBeef because, like we said, LaBeef was alive in the remake, dead in the original, alive in the remake. So maybe she's gonna try to see LaBeef next. It sort of ends ambiguous there.
but even that, like, she's like, I might see LaBeef. He's probably 70, closer to 80. You know, like I get it. It's a gritty western. I had no fun with that ending.
Yeah,
It actually made me feel like, why did I watch the film? Because like there's this hope, that's throughout the film. Like they have this impossible task of going into Indian country, as it were, and trying to, bring justice for her father's death. It's a young girl who has she's way above her head, and all these like lawmen that have been around the block and who killed and seen people get killed, they know it. And even though this little girl who basically is living a fairy tale of revenge, um, she shows so much grit and determination that they come around and they're behind her. So by the end, Cogburn does like this little girl. He's like, Jesus Christ, you're a tough little son of a bitch. And there's again this tender moment where it's like, all right, maybe the arm being okay and her not dying, maybe that's a little far fetched given medicine at the time. But like, I don't know if the movie needs a feel good ending, but it is kind of a feel good ending, and it leaves you hopeful for her future because he says, "Oh, I'm not. You shouldn't bury me here. That's for your husband and your kids." It lets you think that she has a future, whereas here you jump cut to her future and it's shit. She's got an arm missing. She's like everyone's kind of portrayed her as an old like spinster. Like she doesn't have a family. She doesn't have anything. And when she does finally muster up to go meet the guy that helped her get revenge, he's already dead. And the most anticlimactic shit I've ever seen in my life. Like he's already dead, and she's like, "Well, that sucks. I'll move his body, and maybe I'll go see LaBeef." The end. Like I don't know. Just it left a bad taste in my mouth.
yeah. I don't even know where to start.
Or ranked.
What was that? No, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. Yeah, it was definitely, I guess, suppose a grittier ending in the remake. Okay, I'll go back to the original. It was a little sort of cheesy, over the top, like feel good, but I do like that thing you said. It kind of left you with hope, right? Okay, her arm's messed up. You don't know exactly what's going on. You're assuming it's going to heal, right? And then you have hope that she's going to, maybe have a family of her own and that family plot one day. I don't mind her losing the arm in the remake. I don't even mind the jump cut 25 years into the future. I didn't like how they kind of played with our expectations and went like, oh, she's going to finally see him after all these years, I think they should have done a reunion. I think having him mail her a letter and then saying, yeah, this would be great to see you, and then just having him dead, I don't know if that was the best choice. He either should have been dead already and then she moves him to her family plot, or maybe just, have at least one meeting with them. I think that was just too dark of an ending, too sour of a taste left in your mouth after this long journey, like you said.
Right.
So, I don't agree with him being dead, but I thought it was okay that she didn't have the arm and was maybe sort of alone. I thought so.
Like you mentioned, if she doesn't have the arm and she doesn't have the family, I'm okay with that. Like I get it. Like she went through a lot. She was already kind of this tough, outlier of a person. Like she's very unique character. It just it's rough when you see someone that's 14 and then 25 years later you realize their life didn't get better. And maybe that's kind of like the point of this type of revenge, that
Yeah.
it doesn't fix anything, but like I don't know, like Jeff Bridges, like you mentioned, and Labith, they're doing these comedic things. They're having fun together. So for her to just kind of like come to this point where like her life isn't very good as it seems. I mean, maybe she's enjoying herself, but it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, we don't see anything that makes it seem like, oh yeah, life's great now.
I'll take the tropey, Rooster's on his deathbed thing. You got to give me something here. Whether the arm's okay, but he's gone, or she lost the arm, but like they had their meeting, they got to make their peace. She shows up, and again, this is tropey weird stuff. Like she shows up, and Lil Beef is there, and he's the one that tells what happened. Because like Rooster sent me a letter too, and they both kind of that to me, there's some satisfaction there to have two characters I've never been introduced to in their little Ringling Bros like Wild West show say, "Oh, Rooster, they have a lot of fun together." Till 3 days ago, the heat took them, and it's like, "Oh, thanks, random character. I guess I'm gonna go home and bury my friend." The jump cut kills me in this setting with Rooster also being dead because she was just 14. Now she's 40 and like her life is shit. And like, why did I go on this journey? It kind of took away from it for me. I understand it, like I said, grit, realism, like life isn't always fair, but you're giving me a movie. The arc was kind of supposed to sort of wrap that part of her life up, and it just doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I guess what they were going for, you had kind of mentioned it, is maybe just a cautionary tale about what happens with you. Revenge becomes an obsession for you. And I could sort of understand that, but I think I'm sort of in the same boat as you. It's just like, you gotta give me something. We just
Yeah.
went on this journey together. Okay, maybe she lost her arm, maybe she's not married, but at least have the Hollywood trope, the reunion at the end, right? I'm thinking, like Shawshank Redemption, when Andy and Red meet on the beach, just have them walking towards each other and then
Yeah.
pan out and give me credits. I would have been fine with that ending. Sure, it's a little cliche, but I think she learned her lesson. She lost the arm. We
Right.
don't have to have her not be able to just express to this man, like, like her gratitude, or just like, maybe she can complain to him like this was a mistake, just some closure for her. I feel like her moving him to the family plot's not enough for
No.
her story to have closure, because after that night there had to be a million things she wanted to say to him, and you don't give her anything. It's
The fact that she strikes me as the type of person that would have found him before that moment.
That's true. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. She
Like
she would have immediately found him.
This is screenplay choices, but I think an adequate ending for me is like she gets there, and it is a Wild West show, and maybe he's now like his drinking problem is exacerbated, and it's actually kind of sad. Like you could see the audience, he's shooting the guns, but like he's fat and like losing it, and the audience is kind of like clowning him, and like maybe she has a moment where she's like, I remember this moment when you were more than this. I think that even that type of sad ending where Brewster has given himself to his vices and he hasn't progressed. I think that there could have been a tender moment where they like recount the way it was.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, it just
Like they lost so much since they last met, but at least they have each other, kind of a thing.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
I would have dug that. Yeah.
It's just even like a recognition that even if he's gone over the hill, it's over. There's no more Cowboys. Those days are over. Them sharing that moment of, you know what, you might be like pathetic now, but there was a time where you were worth something.
Yeah,
And
where
I
you,
think-
in my eyes, you were like everything. It
Right.
could have had a nice moment. A little tropey, like we said, but we were on this journey together for almost 2 hours. We could have given us something to just have a little hope for the future.
Because I think when you're talking about tropes and what impressed me about both films, but obviously the original and I guess even more so the actual story that it derives from. What impressed me from the jump was that your main character isn't Rooster
Hmm.
Cogburn. Your main character is a 14-year-old girl that, through all odds and against all like gender norms and stereotypes, she's the most capable person in the film.
Hmm.
Like she uses her brain and not just her brawn, and you know that portrayal is fascinating for the Western genre. It's a great kind of turn for that type of movie, and it made it a little bit more interesting than if we had just watched like your standard like Western film.
Yeah, like damsel in distress. I'm the man. I got to save the woman. You know.
Right. And it's like, all right, like we did that, so I I don't know, I want more for that character
Yeah.
because that character did so much. But maybe that is the reality that like you can take a 14-year-old girl and take her on a journey where she sees people dying and she gets poisoned. Like maybe that is the toll of that type of heroism. But I guess for a film, it just left me with no. I didn't enjoy that particular ending.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. It's almost like you try to go against expectations and like gender norms, and then like you get punished for it in the end instead
Yeah,
of rewarded. It's it's disheartening to see it take such a low dive at the end.
yeah,
There should be some compensation for just tr- blazing some trails or something.
yeah, yeah. Or even, and I know again I'm nitpicking. I'm like kind of thinking of alternate scenarios. Even if you see like when she's younger, like that she's going to lose an arm, and like Rooster like being there, coming to that realization. Even if she's like I don't know, like not even like awake for it, and he's just like, "This is my fault. Like I failed
Hmm.
this girl, and that's why I left." It's like you can leave this stuff in like the margins and not say it, and like here we are kind of thinking about it, but like it's a movie, you don't have to feed me everything, but like maybe show that.
Yeah, yeah. Don't put all the work on us, right?
It just makes more sense that she hasn't seen Rooster in 25 years if that was like his choice.
Hmm.
You know, I
I
don't know.
kind of like that. Like, have him be like so filled with like remorse or like just grief of what happened to her that he doesn't want to see her. And then, like, you know what? Then you have the ending where, yeah, she wants to see him, even despite the fact that her arm came off. She still would love to see him. And then just have that, give me that reunion. Oh, I want that reunion so bad.
Yeah, I know, I know, I know. Even if it's not a good reunion, even
Yeah.
if it's even if he's ultimately failed her in how his life went, like get please. Jeff Bridges, he was cool. It was fun, you know. I thought we were gonna get to see some shitty CGI where he was super old. Really cool, but it's all good. I mean, like I said, I'm splitting hairs.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that you're right that the original is probably too cheesy,
Hmm.
and the remake is a little too dark.
Right.
Somewhere in the middle is where that should live.
Exactly. Again, I know they're trying to go maybe for the angle of like caution of like a tale of revenge. Like revenge ultimately just leaves everybody unhappy. But again, it's a movie, right?
Mhm.
We don't need to lay down the lessons that thick. She
Right.
lost her arm. She doesn't have to be completely alone in this life. She could
Yeah.
have somebody, and that could have been, it should have been Cogburn.
Yeah. I agree.
Do you think there were any scenes cut from the original that you missed, or were there any scenes put in the remake that you thought were unnecessary? Maybe we could.
Um, they kind of play it different in the remake where, as you mentioned, the sun in his eyes, like that scene where they're actually shooting at the cornbread. Like,
Hmm.
do I need them shooting at bread? Like, I don't know. But also in the original, their take on it was just basically having John Wayne fall off his horse. So those were like those different moments where there's some slight changes that doesn't change much. It's like, do I need some of these scenes? And not so much, but I get it. You're kind of doing a one-to-one thing with a twist on it. Same thing for me with the two bandits, like with LaBeef being the one to kind of close up the chimney and have them smoked out. It made more sense to me, but it's not a deal breaker at all. I can't really think of anything that jumps out at me as that should have been cut or that should have been in there. Outside of really, I think where I find the most struggles are the intros and the outros.
Hmm.
That's, I struggle the most because they actually flavor the entire film. So like in the context of everything you saw, the intros fairly weak, the outros very bleak.
Yeah.
So it could be affecting my watching of the entire thing. You know,
Hmm.
I try to keep that in mind.
In terms of scenes that were different, I think all the scenes that were added, or most of the scenes that were added to the remake, were pretty much for comedic effect. Talking
Mm,
about that shootout, while it might not have been a necessary scene, I thought it was pretty enjoyable. Just
oh, yeah,
watching them constantly shoot the cornbread and then disputing like who shot the cornbread. I shot it. No, you shot it, or I shot it. Whatever. And so again, just giving these characters a little more to do than just we're on pursuit all the time. Gives them
hmm
a little more depth. And I know they added more of. I'm trying to look up her name. Where is she? Grandma Turner. Grandma
oh,
Grandma Turner gets a little more action in the remake, which
but-
oddly enough I welcomed with open arms. I was like, okay, give Grandma Turner just a few more scenes, because she's introduced in the original and then you just never hear from her again. And then in the remake, you get not one but two nights alone with Grandma Turner, snoring her ass off and stealing Maddie's blanket. So again, more comedy, more levity, and I
yeah,
appreciated that because these films do move pretty slow,
yeah,
and you need something to kind of keep you keep you going with them. So I appreciate the remake for throwing in more humor there.
yeah. And also, I mean, smart cuts, silent times and everything, but like removing some of the more like racial aspects that
Hmm.
um, don't really lead anywhere, but are just kind of racist. It's like that's an interesting portrayal of how you think Chinese people play cards, but I don't think we need to to relive that stuff.
I did miss the cat though. I wish the cat was
I did
there.
miss the cat. Yeah, some sort of cat equivalent would have been very helpful here.
Hmm.
Um, no, no, I mean yeah, like you said, a lot of the additions are to play the humor. I didn't have any real issue with any of the additions. I think they did just play to what the movie was trying to do.
I guess just in general, just talking about the humor. Like, did you find the original movie funny in general,
Uh,
or is it
no,
maybe just a type of humor that's just outplayed by these days? And it's like, well, maybe that worked in 1960, but by
right.
today's standards, it's comes across as maybe a little hokey and forced.
Yeah, I mean, he had some kind of funny lines about the cat. I forget his name, like Sergeant or General, whatever. And John Wayne had a few lines where he was over the top and saying something funny. And like, I just found his general demeanor at that point in his career and sort of what he was doing. I found aspects of it funny. I don't think the movie was trying to make those things funny. I mean, really, the only punchline the first film has that he's old and fat. Like that's it's kind of like it in terms of the humor. Some little lines peppered in here or there. The dude making the chicken sounds in both films I found to be strange.
Yeah, I
But
was surprised they kept that in the remake. I'm like, you kept the farm guy. Okay, that
yeah,
I feel like that could have been an easy cut.
I guess something we didn't address. Maybe we didn't address it because there's not much there. Did you have any take on, I guess, the different bandits as there were from both films? They seem pretty.
Yeah, you got Robert Duvall playing Ned Pepper, and you have Barry Pepper playing Ned Pepper. Look at that! Like he was born to
Yeah,
play the role.
absolutely.
I didn't really know. They didn't really do much in either film.
Right.
They
Yeah.
just they were in charge. They bossed Tom Chaney around, but in terms of like, did their characters do anything to really make it memorable? Not really. I mean, like you said, you kind of mentioned way before, like they kind of have their own like codes and laws. Like
Right.
they told Cheney don't hurt the girl. But other than that, yeah, it could have been anybody. It didn't have to be Robert
Yeah.
Duvall or Barry Pepper. They're pretty forgettable performances and just forgettable characters in general.
Looking at the cast, because the cast is really impressive. in both films, but
Yeah, it
you
is.
know, in the remake, like I'm sitting there and I'm looking at Josh Brolin and I'm like, I mean, it's cool. I like Josh Brolin, but like, I don't know, maybe you could have built a little bit lower. Like, I don't know, what value he brought to you. I mean, his acting, of course, was fine, but it's just like that could have been anybody, you know. Like I like the actor, but yeah, I found that in both films there wasn't a lot of play with the villains. I think part of it is because you are searching for them. They are mysterious. You don't know who they are. Like in the original film, they had a line that I don't think was in the remake, where they talked about like the original Mexican Bob.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that.
You know, it was like that was kind of funny because Maddie's like, "There's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
more than one." It's like those little moments in the original, they're just not there enough for me to say that it was especially comedic. I think True Grit did a good job in the remake of you got to break that stuff up. If you're gonna make I guess the ending and parts of it so dark, I'm glad that there was some humor because
Yes. Because otherwise, there'd be no reason to watch the remake if it's just dark all the time. And
yeah,
we're just on this hunt. I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
do you know the ratings on the films? Like was
The IMDb, the Rotten Tomatoes ratings.
well, I mean like was
Oh, the rated
rate
R, rated whatever. I'd imagine the remake's rated R. Or does it have to be? They didn't drop any F bombs. And there's some blood, but not a whole lot of blood.
I imagine that probably hit that PG-13 range. Which is probably why they made
It probably did hit PG-13 because it did make a lot of money. Usually rated R movies don't. PG-13 for the remake and rated G for the original. Actually,
okay.
the original was supposed to be rated M. That's
Okay.
right. But then it was remade and or just given a G rating in the end.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like the one thing that kind of struck me, and I know we talked about this a little bit, was just the Academy Award for that film. You know, like I know it's kind of a makeup call, but like when I watch that original film, I John Wayne feels like an afterthought to me.
Yeah. Definitely a lot of the weight of that movie is on the Maddie character. And John Wayne's kind of just going for the ride there.
Yeah, she just does
Heavy
a lot
lifting.
of heavy lifting,
Yeah.
whereas in that remake, Jeff Bridges carries plenty of his own weight. Like Jeff Bridges, I would say they by the end, I'm leaning towards Jeff Bridges being like the main thing going. Like
Mm-hmm.
Maddie does a great job, or Haley Stanfield does a great job, but Jeff Bridges, he's the dude abides, man. Like,
It's funny you say that because the remake was nominated for many acting Oscars. Jeff Bridges got Best Actor nomination, and Haley, who is in the film more screen-wise time or screen time, but she only got a Best Supporting Actress nomination, not a Best Actress nomination.
right.
So yeah, so he definitely sort of takes over at points where he's the more interesting character. Whereas the original, it definitely feels like Maddie the whole time that you want to follow has the more interesting story, or just is the more interesting character.
I found that to be completely the case in the original. You know, um, like you mentioned, I can point to three different characters that I cared about or was following in the remake versus in the original.
Mm-hmm.
Like hopefully it all, and maybe that's why I kind of like the ending where it's like, yeah, I'm glad it did work out for her. It would have been kind of rough in that particular movie, the original,
Yeah.
to have that character have such a bad ending. I don't think that would have played well at all, given that I truly say this that I think that she is the movie in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
John Wayne, of course, is John Wayne, but like she's the movie as far as I'm concerned. In the remake, I get it. I guess if they want to end it that way, I don't want to harp on that too much. But
Yeah.
did you like the horses in the original or the remake more?
What'd you think about that name, Little Blackie?
um, yeah, it was cool. You know what was funny about the little blackie thing? I'm glad we brought this up. that's kind of why I brought it up. I wanted to go there. Um, when she gets the horse in the remake, and the little black kid is outside, he's like, "What are you gonna name it?" And
To say it with a black kid right there. Yeah, you're right.
like, hey, you know, I'm gonna call him Little Blackie, and I'm just like, you know what? Unintended, but I was like, that's pretty humorous, and I'm, I get it. It was the name of the horse in the book, I'm sure, and
Yeah, it definitely doesn't have any like racial over or undertones. That's for sure.
no.
It, that's not the intention.
Like we're having fun with it, but like that's not at all what's
Yeah,
happening.
yeah.
So, uh, so funny. Uh, yeah, I think we're out of things.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Let's get into our final verdicts here, shall we? All right, Reggie. We both said a lot of things about the original and the remake. Or let me start that again. So we both said a lot of things about the remake. Ultimately, what do you think, Reggie? Should they have made this movie?
This is one of those times where I'm going to say that they should have made the remake. I have some of my gripes about intros and outros, but everything in between felt pretty good to me as a movie. And after doing some research on the film and actually some of what they did with that material afterwards in Hollywood, this is a much better interpretation of some of that material than what actually happened with like sequels and things like that with True Grit. I don't want I don't want to bring too much of that up, but like they kind of milked it and made some weird choices. So this movie was good, and I have no problem with it existing. I just had some problems with some of the tone and intros and outros, but overall, great movie.
Yeah. So after I watched the original, I was trying to think, what can the remake really do to warrant it being made? And the main thing I could really think of, because I really liked the story of the original. I thought, like you said, just the portrayal, or just having Maddie be this driving force, this young girl. So I thought maybe just the acting and maybe just a little bit of the action, and you definitely get that with the remake, hands down. So this was a good remake. It wasn't perfect, but I definitely recommend it. I think it was pretty good. It was enjoyable to watch. Definitely with the portrayals. Jeff Bridges as Rooster Cogburn is highly enjoyable to watch. Matt Damon is just a ridiculous dumpling doofus who has a good arc. And Haley Steinfeld, her portrayal is actually a 14-year-old girl, and she's solid the entire film. I do wish they kept some things from the original, and I'm sort of on the same boat as you. Like, I don't have so much issue with the intro, but the ending, but the ending definitely left me a little cold. I wish they had done something a little more happier at the end, I suppose.
Yeah.
But overall, it was a fun ride. I think it makes sense for a modern movie audience. I think people are gonna like the portrayals in general. The three leads are strong as hell, and they're a lot more memorable than they were in the original.
No, completely agreed. It's just you know, sometimes remakes have a bad name to them. We've gone over some decent ones on this podcast. We've gone over some really bad ones. This definitely goes under the category of actually good, if not great remakes, and I'm glad that they did it.
Yeah. Like we said, there's definitely issues with it. It's not a perfect remake. And there's stuff in the original I liked that the remake didn't do. But overall, again, it just comes back to that acting. They gave the characters a little more to do. It was a little more humorous. It works more for a modern audience. You might not buy some of the stuff that the original does, because it does come across as a little bit cheesy sometimes. And it's just not as gritty as that remake. And when you caught a movie called True Grit, Reggie, you need something with a little grit, and the remake definitely has that.
You got to chop off a 14-year-old girl's arm. That's grit. That's true grit.
True Grit. And, like, even the scene where they're like gonna rip out LaBeef's tongue, I was like, oh shit, man. I don't remember this, but damn.
And honestly, when I watch the two films, like I'm not sure the original author's portrayal, but like when I think about True Grit, and both films do this very well, I think about the Matty Ross character way more than Cogburn. Cogburn, sure, he's old time Western guy, he's gritty, but like to be so young and to take on so much, that to me felt like the real True Grit, and I'm glad that we watched these films.
Yeah. It really is a compelling story, just watching this young girl take charge. And then, not to knock her again, but, Haley Steinfeld is the age, the appropriate age, as opposed to Kim Darby, who was 22 with a kid and in the process of getting divorced at the time. So she's seen a thing or two at that
Yeah.
age. Yeah, it's all about the Maddie character, and she's done really well in both
Mhm.
movies.
Yeah, and Stanfield had a pretty decent career since then.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
watched The Edge of 17 recently. She was pretty good in that. She was in
yeah,
the
yeah.
Bumblebee movie. I didn't see that, but
I was looking at that on IMDb. It was like, wow, still going at it. So
yeah,
kudos.
yeah. She was really good in the remake. So that Oscar nomination was definitely warranted. It was good. Anything else? Oh, should we go over some of these random facts that I found on IMDb?
Yeah, let's go over some of these random facts.
Okay. Most of these facts are about the original.
Yeah.
We sort of said we liked Kim Darby's performance and what she did with Maddie, but not everybody did. Who didn't like Kim Darby? Well, John Wayne, for one, was disappointed by the casting of Kim Darby. Also, the director did not like Kim Darby. So you have the main lead and the director not liking our lead actress. I thought that was interesting. And John Wayne did not only have a beef with Kim Darby, but he also didn't get along with Robert Duvall. He did
Okay.
not like the finished film. He had a lot of issues with this, but he still got his Oscar. So, what does that matter?
Because at the time, a lot of the stuff he was doing was like, because he was basically a Hollywood institution at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He had his own sort of like in-house writers for a lot of things, and this was written by a different team, and he had a lot of apprehension about playing Rooster. When it got closer to filming it, he really didn't know what he was going to do.
Yeah.
So, I'm glad he just stuck to what he always does. No knock on John Wayne. He was incredible, but we know he was kind of a one-note actor.
Yeah. I think one reason he might not have liked Kim Darby is because he wanted and sort of promised that his daughter, that she could play the role of Maddie. So
Ooh,
that might have been like a personal reason that he
I
didn't
bet.
like. Yeah, I'm sure that. And the director, again, Harry Hathaway, another performance he didn't like in the film was Glenn Campbell,
Mm.
LaBeef.
Brief.
And speaking of LaBeef, another musician was supposed to originally portray him. That was Elvis Presley. Was originally going to be in LaBeef. That would have been. I feel like that would have been a completely different film because I feel like I would have been watching John Wayne and Elvis Presley with this little girl. I would not have seen the character at all if Elvis
Yeah.
was in this movie. The only reason he wasn't in it is because his manager wanted Elvis to get top billing, and that was a no-no
Happened.
around John Wayne.
And honestly, I guess you never know. Like sometimes a film will make you think a different way about someone and their acting abilities, but I have to imagine that it would have kind of tainted this film, and we would have got a worse product.
Yeah.
Not saying that Elvis is a bad actor. It's too much of that random over the top star power, like John Wayne and Elvis in a movie. Like that just sounds like a bad trivia night.
Okay, the novel just takes place a lot in snowy conditions. We didn't mention this, but the remake does have a lot of snow going on. There's no snow in the original. I guess it's just easier to do that with modern technology these days.
Sure.
Oh, and here's some movie bar trivia for you. In the original True Grit, Rooster Cogburn wears his eye patch on the left eye. In the remake of True Grit, he wears his eye patch on the right eye. So there you
Wow.
go. There's your movie trivia for the bar.
I was also reading that they made John Wayne's eye patch out of gauze so that he could actually see out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he doesn't have true grit.
Can't method act. He needs to see with both eyes. Okay, that's all I got with my random facts.
Before we leave, because you know what, I just thought about this because I was giving the remakes ending a little bit of shit. John Wayne jumping over that fence, and then that freeze frame, that was rough.
I mean, we already said it was cheesy as
That was
hell.
that
But
was a
yes,
step too far.
it was to play on the joke because she had said he was too fat to jump over a 3-tier fence or something, and he was able to do it. So He wasn't too fat at the end, I guess. I don't
I
know.
guess not.
That was the joke. That's the humor that we're dealing with in the 60s, so definitely improved in the remake. That's for sure.
Not 100%.
All right, so do you want to figure out what movies we're going to look at next?
Cool. Break out the old list.
So we just did a Western.
We're coming off of sci-fi. We're coming off of westerns. We're coming off of horror. Might be time to go back into either like an action or like a comedic kind of realm.
Want action? How about Death
Yeah,
Wish?
Death Wish, huh? Hmm.
Isn't Bruce Willis in the remake?
I think so. Oh, Death Wish remake. Yeah, boy, oh boy.
You want to do Death Wish?
Wait,
Bad News Bears comedy,
Bad News Bears is a comedy.
sports comedy.
Are we to the point where we want to hit like an Oceans?
I was looking at Oceans. You want to do Oceans? We kind of are, when did we do Italian Job? Because I feel like we talked about a lot. But Oceans 11. There's a Little Shop of Horrors musical.
Yeah, because it's not truly like a horror film.
Yeah, it's not really a horror film. It's kind of a musical comedy, right?
Cool. Let's do that.
You want to do that one? Jack
do it.
Nicholson's in the original.
Nice.
All right,
All right.
so let's change it up completely, Reggie, and do sort of a musical here. Let's do a Little Shop of Horrors.
Can't beat it. All right. I like that. I like to kind of switch it up.
Yeah,
Bring some,
change it up from all the action and depressing cowboy movies.
yeah, depressing, armless 14-year-olds. All right. Yeah, a little levity in our lives.
Yeah, all right. So let's do a Little Shop of Horrors. That'll be a fun one. That concludes this episode. Thanks for listening. If you guys have any comments, did you agree with what we said? Disagree? Definitely let us know. You can reach me, Dan Bulick, at Console Wars Guys on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or on YouTube, youtube.com/Console Wars.
And I'm Reggie Parker. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at RP Comedy. Or check out my website, rpcomedy.com.
All right. And thanks for listening to another episode of
Retro versus Remake.
I like the hand thing you're doing. Try to get the timing. That's good.